Hello everyone, my name is Marina and today's presentation is going to be about ways of teaching a new language. More exactly, we are going to talk about the direct method, the silent way, Desuggestopedia, community language learning, total physical response, content-based and participatory approaches. I'm going to talk about the first method, which is the direct method, and then I'm going to talk about the second one, which is the silent way. The direct method. It is a method of teaching language directly, establishing a direct association between experience and expression, between an English word and its meaning without using translation, but demonstration and dramatization. It is named direct because meaning should be connected directly with the target language without using translation and the native tongue. Language can be learned only through demonstration, and instead of procedures of explaining grammar rules, students should be encouraged to use language naturally, and in this way they can induce the grammar rules. This method emphasizes on the importance of simple words, sounds, sentences, and direct association between language and objects and people and environment. The main principle of this method are classroom instruction is conducted exclusively in the target language, no translation in the native language, no words from the native language. Everyday vocabulary and sentences are taught. Sentences describing action, describing free time actions, everyday actions, simple words. Vocabulary is taught through known words, demonstration, pictures, miming. Grammar is taught inductively. There may never be an explicit grammar rule given. So in this way, students are supposed to figure out the rules themselves through the teacher's explanations and demonstrations. New teaching points are introduced orally. Both speech and listening comprehension are taught. The syllabus is based on situations or topic, not usually on linguistic structures. Correct pronunciation is emphasized. Students should learn to think in the target language as soon as possible, not translating all over again from their native language. And the purpose of language learning is communication, so the students are supposed to learn how to ask questions and also how to answer them. Techniques. The first one is Q&A, question and answer. The teacher is supposed to ask a question of any nature, and the students are supposed to answer it. A dictation. The teacher is supposed to read the passage out loud, for example, for 3 times, and the students are supposed to write it down. Then, reading aloud. Students should take turn reading a section of a passage, play, or dialogue out loud. And the last one is paragraph writing. The students are asked to write a passage in their own words. Advantages of this method. It promises to teach the language and not about the language. It is a natural method which teaches language in the same way that the native tongue is, the mother tongue is acquired, and it is an advantage that it emphasizes speaking. And criticism. In spite of its achievement, the direct method is hardly integrated by the public schools. The second method, it's called the silent way. It is a method based on the premise that the teacher should be silent as much as possible, while the student should be encouraged to talk, to produce language as much as possible. The focus is on the student and the way he or she talks. The silent way assumes that learners work with resources and nothing else, as they are solely responsible for what they learn. The main principle of this method. The first one, Teaching should be subordinate to learning. The second, language is not learned by repeating after a model, in this case the professor or the teacher. Students need to develop their own inner criteria for correctness, so they develop self-correction. It is the student that should be practicing the language and not the teacher. That's why the teacher is silent and the students are supposed to talk and produce language. And errors and mistakes are really important and necessary for learning, like in any domain. Pedagogical materials that are effective to use. The first one, word chart wall, charts on which the words are written with the same colors code as the rectangle chart. The second one is the FIDAL. This shows all the possible spellings for each phoneme, and which also use the same color code as the rectangle chart. The third one, questionnaire roads, are used to create clear and visible situations that enable students to understand how a given concept is expressed in the language. And the pointer creates the dynamic of the language by introducing the element of time in relation to different charts, which are in themselves static. Learner roles. Learners are expected to develop independence, autonomy, and responsibility. The autonomous learner chooses proper expression in a given set of circumstances and situations. Learners have only themselves as individuals and the group to rely on, so they should learn how to work together. Teacher roles. The teacher roles is one of a neutral observer, not praise, not criticize. He is there only for guide the student. The teacher is silent, like I said. The teacher's presence in the classroom is limited to providing a model of the language for his or her students. And advantages of this method. Students learn by themselves. They are able to fix their own pronunciation based on the teacher's guidance, and learning through problem solving fosters creativity, discovery, an increase in intelligence potency, and long-term memory. But there are also disadvantages, like there is a lack of pronunciation knowledge, so it is sometimes confusing, and there is lack of the teacher's guidance. So these were the first two methods. I hope you enjoy it and found it interesting and useful to use when you are going to be a teacher. And stay safe, stay home, and be productive. Goodbye.
Hello everyone, my name is Moisi Gabriela, and today I will continue to talk about Desuggestopedia in community language learning. Desuggestopedia. Desuggest is the opposite of suggest. To overcome some learning problem, this method puts importance on desuggesting limitation on learning. But what is Desuggestopedia? We do not use the full mental powers we have to use our received capacity. If we have some limitations, we have need to be desuggested. The origin. The Bulgarian scientist Dr. George Lozanov has demonstrated that through a cheerfully orchestrated learning environment, including most importantly a special trained teacher, because the learning process can be accelerated by a factor of 3 to 10 times enjoyably. The goal of the teachers. Teachers hope to accelerate by process to students by using a foreign language for everyday communications. The students' mental power must be tapped by suggesting the psychological barriers learners bring with them to the learning situations and using techniques to activate the paraconscious part of mind, just below the fully conscious mind. Classroom setup. The challenge of the teacher is to create a classroom environment which is cheerful. These conditions are not always possible. However, the teacher should try to provide as positive an environment as possible. The students learn English not only from direct instruction, but also from indirect instruction. It is encouraged through the present in the learning environment of posters and decoration featuring the target language and various grammatical information. They are changed from time to time. By doing this, the students can learn many things indirectly in the classroom or outside the classroom. The teacher may or may not call attention to the posters. For example, students can produce simple sentences by using the posters or grammatical information on the wall. Fine arts. On the conscious plane, the learner attends to the language. On the subconscious planes, the fine arts, it could be drama or music, etc., suggests that learning is easy and pleasant. When there is a unit between conscious and subconscious, learning is improved. Choosing a new identity. The posters are changed every few weeks to create a sense of novelty in the environment. Students select target language and names and choose new occupations. During the course, they create whole biographies to go along with their new identities. The active concert. The two concerts are components of the receive phase of the lesson. In the first concert, the teacher reads the dialogue in the target language. Music is played. After a few minutes, the teacher begins a slow and dramatic reading. But passive concert. In the second phase, the students are asked to put their script aside. They simply listen as the teacher reads the dialogue at the normal rate of the speed. The teacher is seated and reads with music. Primary activation. This technique follows components of the active phase of the lesson. Students playfully rewrite the target language dialogue out loud, as individuals or in groups. Creative adaptation. Activities particularly recommended for this phase including singing, dancing, dramatizations, and games to accelerate the process of learning a foreign language for everyday communication. The role of the teacher is also very important. The teacher is the authority in the classroom. The students must trust and respect her or him. Characteristics of the teaching and learning process are classroom atmosphere, decorations, handouts for advanced students, no assignment and no tests, and also games, music, drawing, etc. We have two types of interactions between students-teacher and student-students. The teacher starts interactions with the whole group of students with individuals right from the beginnings of the language courses. Initially, the students can only respond non-verbally or with a few target language words, like no, yes, of course, etc. Later, the students have more control of the target language and can respond more appropriately and even start interaction themselves. Language is the first of the two planes of communication. The second plane are some nonverbal factors which influence the linguistic message. The culture which students learn concerns the everyday life of people who speak the language. The use of the fine arts is also important in digestopedic classes. The fine arts like singing, dancing, drawing, dramatizations, play role, games, songs, etc. Areas and skills of language that are emphasized. Vocabulary is emphasized. Claims about the success of the method focus in a large number of words that can be acquired. Grammar is dealt with explicitly but minimally, because the paraconscious mind will observe the linguistic rules. Speaking is emphasized. Students also read in the target language, for example, conversations, and write, for example, short letters. The role of the student's native language. Native language translation is used to make the meaning of the dialogue clear. The teacher also uses the native language in the classes when it is necessary. The course precedes. The teacher uses the native language less and less. The errors of the students are corrected gently and kind, with the teacher using a soft voice. Conclusions. Teacher will find different situations and different types of students in learning. Therefore, teacher should be creative, should be smart in choosing and using different types of methods in teaching different skills of language. Using Desuggestopedia is very interesting but also challenging to do. In addition, the key factors of effective teaching are not the approaches and methods in language teaching themselves, because there is no perfect technique. However, there is no end for teacher to seek the perfection of the approaches and methods in language teaching. Community language learning, or CLL, is a language teaching approach in which students work together to develop what aspects of language they would like to learn. It is based on the counseling approach, in which the teacher acts as a counselor while the learner is seen as a client. Students are encouraged to express how they feel about the learning process. Activities like translations, recording, reflection, group work are also very important. Sit the learners in a circle around a tape recorder. The teacher is outside the circle. Build up a manageable part of conversation. Stop. Play the tape back and listen again and again. Write the conversation on the board. The students ask you questions about the language and you explain briefly. If necessary, write up translations too, a clear translation. If they want to copy things down, they can at this point. Ask the learners to have a short conversation using the language you have got on the board, and this is all. Some advantages of CLLR: works well with lower level students who are struggling in spoken English. It creates a warm relationship between teacher and learners, trains students to become independent. But we have also some disadvantages. Teacher has to be highly proficient in the target language and in the language of the students. Translation is a difficult task. It is time consuming to carry out. Thank you very much, and don't forget, go big or go home. Now we can do both. Goodbye.
Hello everyone, my name is Simona Andrea Gavrila, and today I'll continue to talk about two teaching methods. The first one is Total Physical Response, TPR, and the second one is Content-Based Instruction, CBI. What is Total Physical Response? It's a language teaching method built around the coordination of speech and action. It attempts to teach language through physical motor activity. TPR is a method developed by Dr. James Asher in 1977, a professor of psychology. He developed TPR as a result of his experiences observing young children learning the first language. He wondered why so many people have a hard time learning a second language, although almost no one has no trouble while learning their first language. He came up with a couple of explanations. The first one is that many teachers use methods that were not used while the children are learning the first language. And the second one is that there is often found stress in the second language learning environment. He noticed that interactions between parents and children often took the form of speech from the parent followed by a physical response from the child. Asher made three hypotheses based on his observations. The first one is that language is learned primarily by listening. The second one is that language learning must engage the right hemisphere of the brain. And the third one is that learning language should not involve any stress. Therefore, Asher decided to create a stress-free approach to learn a second language that used many methods found in the first language learning experiences. Teachers are noticing growth in students' learning and boosting the academic levels in their classrooms. Okay, in TPR, instructors give commands to students in the target language and students respond with whole body actions. TPR is often used alongside other methods and techniques. It is popular with beginners and with young learners, although it can be used with students of all levels and all ages groups. Now, some characteristics of TPR. Primarily focus on meaning and comprehension. A great deal of listening and acting, directing a performance in which the students are actors, overcoming the fear of speaking. Reading and writing is taught after grammar and vocabulary. Grammar is taught inductively. Learning language is by gestures, body movements. The teacher and the students are the actors. Students should be more active and talkative. TPR requires initial attention to meaning rather than the form of items, and TPR can be used for all curriculum, literacy, science, math, and so on. Now, who benefits most from TPR? English-speaking students who have little academic reinforcement at home, and of course, struggling students. Nevertheless, TPR seems to work effectively for children and adults, so there is no age barrier. Materials. For absolute beginners, lessons may not require the use of materials since the teacher's voice, actions, and gestures may be sufficient. The teacher can use basic classroom objects such as books, pens. As the course develops, the teacher will need to collect new materials. This may include pictures, slides, words, charts. Now, roles of learners and teacher. Learners have the primary role of listener and performer. They listen attentively and respond physically to the commands given. The teacher, who has a direct and active role, has the responsibility of providing the best kind of exposure to language. Now, let's see the differences between traditional method and TPR. Traditional method. In traditional method, teachers are centered. There is too much spoon feeding. Non-communicative method neglects students' creativity. Error as a sin. Threatening, the teacher explains everything. Sometimes the teacher's explanation is not clear and students are just listeners. But with TPR method, students are centered. Active learning by the students, stress on student creativity. Input must be used as best of creativity. Relaxing and non-frightening, the teacher gives motivation and encouragement to the students. The teacher's role as stage manager and students are actors. Okay, now what are the advantages of TPR? So students enjoy moving around the class. Not preparing long hours before the class, effective for both adult and young learners, good tool for building vocabulary, class size does not need to be a problem, and actions help build connections in the brain. So now, what are the disadvantages of TPR? Most useful for beginners. Unfortunately, it is limited since everything cannot be explained within this method. It must be combined with other approaches. It is only focused on listening, comprehension, and speaking. Now, the conclusion is that TPR is one of the teaching methods that emphasize active learning through actions. 3 steps that are used in this method. to listen, to watch, and imitate repeatedly. Escher stressed that TPR should be used in association with other methods and techniques. The second technique is content-based instruction. Learning a new language can be difficult. Most people rely on the traditional method of language instruction, which is based on translation and memorization. For example, a student learning German might translate the English word for bread to Brot in German. The idea is that the new words will be memorized over time, so this method focuses on repetition. An alternative to this method is content-based instruction, a powerful tool for language instruction. Simply stated, the language becomes a tool for learning new things instead of the topic. So, what is content-based instruction? It's an approach to language teaching that focuses not on the language itself, but rather on what is being taught through language. That is, the language becomes the medium through which something new is learned. For example, studying the French Revolution while using the French language. The language being learned and used is taught within the context of the content. In other words, SBI involves integrating the learning of language with the learning of context simultaneously. Here, content typically means academic subject matters such as math, science, or social studies. The theory of CBI is that when students are engaged with more content, it will promote intrinsic motivation. Students will be able to use more advanced thinking skills when learning new information and will focus less on the structure of the language. Content-based instruction is based on two principles. The first one is people learn a second language more successfully when they use the language as a means of acquiring information. According to this principle, CBI leads to learning language effectively. And the second one is that CBI reflects the learner's needs better while learning a second language. What does a content-based instruction lesson look like? There are many ways to approach creating a CBI lesson. There is one possible way. Preparation. Choose a subject of interest to students. Find 3 or 4 suitable sources that deal with different aspects of the subject. These could be websites, reference books, audio or video of lectures, or even real people. During the lesson, divide the class into small groups and assign each group a small research task and a source of information to use to help them fulfill the task. Then, once they have done their research, they form new groups with students that use other information sources and share and compare their information. What are the advantages? Language learning become more interesting and motivating. CBI offers wide educational knowledge to learners in the form of the different topics instructed. It helps students develop valuable study skills such as note-taking, summarizing, and extracting key information from the text. What are the disadvantages? A CBI implication language instruction can confuse learners, and at the same time it may give them the impression that they are not actually learning a language. And of course, overuse of native language can be a problem in some parts of the lesson. Conclusions. While CBI can be both challenging and demanding for the teacher and the students, it can also be very stimulating and rewarding. That being said, thank you very much for your time and attention.
Hello everyone, my name is Gabriela and I will continue to talk about the last way of teaching a new language, which is the participatory approach. I am going to define what a participatory approach is, what are the methods of the participatory approach, its purpose, advantages and disadvantages. A definition for the participatory approach is termed as an interactive teaching method or learner-centered teaching method that stresses the subjectivity of learners and the self-construction of knowledge. It is the primary role of teachers to pass knowledge and information on to their students, but also students should play an active role in the learning process. Next, I am going to talk about the methods of the participatory approach. These methods expect a high degree of activity and personal involvement of participants in the learning process. They are designed for both smaller or bigger groups of students. The first one is the brainstorming. This method is frequently used to solve problems. It is necessary to respect the principle of non-criticism, fantasy release, mutual inspiration, and equality of the participants. It is also important that this method involves a large number of students. The second one is the workshop. A workshop is a period of discussion or practical work on a particular subject in which a group of people share their knowledge or experience. It is termed as a popular method addressed to discuss specific situations and find possible approaches to their positive management. The third one is the role play. Role play is an excellent way to practice language in situations closer to real life than usual language practice in classroom allows. It does not only train fluency, but are also involved the use of language and body language, gesture, facial expression, body distance, intonation, connected speech, contractions, and so on. Additionally, it is a great fun. For example, the group gets the script with roles, students play a selected situation, and then examine the various possible approaches to solving problems or unexpected events. As I said, this method involves a lot of fun because it is more like a performance on a stage. The last method is called the aquarium method. Through this one, the students are practicing the idea of giving feedback, knowing how to make something count, because one group of students solves the problem and the second one group observes and then provides the feedback. It is good to know that all of these methods revolve around the main element called communication. The way communication is established will say how involved people will feel about the issues raised and how they will participate or not. The main purpose of the participatory approach is building relationships, because once established, content and skills can be transferred both ways, from teacher to students and from students to teacher. The main purpose of the participatory approach is to build up the mind and knowledge of the learner by using the language learning as an instrument for solving social problems. It can also support the students in understanding historical, social, and cultural aspects. Also, it is known that it builds trust through the feeling of ownership, and in this way, the community is stronger. An advantage of this method of teaching is that it builds trust and self-confidence, because students are helping each other and they work as a team. Also, they are interested in what happens around them so they can come up with solutions. Sadly, there are also some disadvantages of this method of teaching a new language, because everything has a consequence, even if it's a good thing or a bad thing. One of the biggest disadvantages is that it takes time for this process to be done completely. Moreover, the idea of commitment comes up. Everyone should be active involved in order to realize the things that have been hinted. It may be difficult to assure that everyone is involved and everyone has the same targets. To sum up, I've learned that the students are encouraged through this method to be themselves and think on their own. In that way, they can become responsible adults who doesn't take everything for granted. Thank you. Stay safe and stay healthy.